A losing battle for President Trump. That's how White House officials are describing the upcoming House vote aimed at compelling the release of all of the Justice Department's Jeffrey Epstein case files. The official made that comment to MSNBC, adding that there's still a chance White House aides meet with House Republicans to try to convince them to vote against the legislation, while acknowledging it will still likely pass despite those efforts. That would mimic the White House's failed pressure campaign this week to whip votes against the discharge petition that paved the way for this pending vote. Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado signed the petition despite being summoned to the White House for a meeting with top officials and receiving a phone call from President Trump himself, all in an attempt to convince her to do otherwise. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he plans to bring the bill to a vote next week. If it passes the House, it would still need to get through the Senate and then be signed by President Trump.
Again, as we said yesterday, there's some fascinating cross currents going on in the Republican Party, especially the MAGA base. Lauren Boebert had some nice words to say about Donald Trump and the people that were trying to pressure her the other day. But then she posted, of course, a video of a local TV station in Colorado praising her for being courageous and not backing down when the White House was putting so much pressure on her. So, again, a lot of cross currents there. And what's so fascinating about this, David Drucker, is you have people like, let's say, Nancy Mace in South Carolina. She wants to be the next governor there in South Carolina, but she's got to get through the Republican primary before. It used to be very easy to just say, oh, well, I'll do what Donald Trump tells me to do. That'll help me with the base. Now I get elected. With Nancy Mace, the calculation's far more complicated. And I mean, I've seen this play out before. You've seen it play out before, where you take the party line vote and then you go home and your own base sees you as being with the deep state or being to Washington. And if Nancy Mace goes along with all of the nonsense that's happening with the DOJ and the FBI and the pressuring on Epstein, then she becomes the very deep state operative, and I put that in quotes, that she and the MAGA base have been attacking for the past decade. So what is a South Carolina Republican to do?
It's fascinating, Joe, because on the one hand, it's so rare that we see House Republicans, any really House Republicans, break with the president in such an overt way, especially with primary season right around the corner. But I think there are a couple of things going on here. One, Donald Trump has lost control of the Epstein conspiracy, right? These are flames that he has fanned, and now this conflagration has gotten out of control. And for the first time in his second presidency, we see him as the victim of events rather than in control of events. You know, you may like nothing that he did during the first 6 months of his presidency, but he was in control of events day to day, both in the executive branch and on Capitol Hill. And that has evaporated. And so I think, one, we have Republicans looking over their shoulder after last week's election and with voters so unhappy about the economy. But I think this is just a case of a particular issue being important in its own right to the president's base and to grassroots Republicans who came to believe earnestly, it turns out, that there is some deep-seated conspiracy behind these Epstein files, and they're not letting it go. And I think the other thing this shows us is that once the president passes from the scene in terms of, in other words, once he's no longer president in a few years, the idea that his coalition is just going to perpetuate on its own isn't, in fact, the case. And that it's going to be very hard for the next Republican nominee, not impossible, but very hard for the next Republican nominee to keep the coalition together that elected the president in 2016 and particularly in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, the Trump coalition is the Trump coalition. Just as I've said a million times, the Reagan coalition was the Reagan coalition. The Obama coalition was the Obama coalition. The Trump coalition ends when Donald Trump's off the scene. And we see it with the Republicans losing in 2017, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, now 25. When Donald Trump's not on the ballot, that coalition stays home.
Right. Also, there's been a lot of discussions here about the politics of the Jeffrey Epstein files and whether they should be released and who it's important to, and it's important to Republicans and important to the MAGA base. But let's just keep in mind this is important for justice for these women who were victims of pedophilia when they were girls, and that's just I don't know anybody who would think, oh, let's just move on and forget about them. That just seems wrong.
That is the argument. And Jonathan O'Meara, that argument wasn't selling when Donald Trump's approval ratings were in the 40s, when things were going well. We saw several months ago, you already had Republicans pushing back again, because this has been a 10-year obsession with the MAGA base. They have believed the deep state for 10 years. Have been hiding the Jeffrey Epstein files, despite the fact that Donald Trump was in power for 4 of those 10 years. But now, think about it. We just talked about the election last week and the incredible victories by Democrats. I mean, historic, especially. You look at Virginia, my gosh, county by county by county. Everything is sweeping away from Republicans. Then you add on top of that, we're going to be talking about it, but Donald Trump's approval rating right now, I think it's the AP, has him at 36%. Others have him at 37, 38%. But he's gotten down into the 30s lately. You look at the right track, wrong track poll, and all of them are going wildly in the wrong direction. Only a third of Americans think America is going on the right track, and 2/3 think it's going on the wrong track. There's a